Welcome to the Genre Hustle, your virtual sci-fi fantasy writers group. I'm Anton.
I'm Chris.
I'm Lucy.
I'm AP.
We have Marissa Vu, our special guest, a freelance editor, and we're going to be talking about editors and editing today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for
I'm
coming.
excited. I'm also a fan of your podcast, by the way.
Well,
so.
that's
Thank
between
you.
you and our mothers, that makes six.
7 fans.
All our moms are pleased to hear that.
Except for AP's mom, apparently.
Speak for yourself.
By the way, don't swear or AP's mom might
Okay, got it.
call you.
Unsubscribe.
Sorry,
Apartment.
AP's mom.
So, Marissa, why don't you give us a quick intro about what you do, how you started, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a manuscript editor, which means I work with authors pretty much from first draft through to their final draft, coaching them through the writing and trying to find all the good stuff and the bad stuff in their stories. And I've been doing it for about 10 years. I started when I lived in Germany, and I interned in a publishing house there and learned the craft and have been doing it ever since.
And you do mostly genre, like science fiction and fantasy, or?
Yeah, I specialize in science fiction and fantasy, so I do other stuff as well. I really like doing a little bit of nonfiction every now and then just to
Clean the palette.
keep it fresh, but mostly science fiction and fantasy.
Does that require any, what are the special skills, if any, for science fiction and fantasy, do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of the same as with any genre. Like, if you don't read in that genre and know what's been done before and know the cliches and the tropes and all that kind of stuff, like, you're just going to miss where the author is going off the rails, or where they're falling back on lazy writing.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to know the genre
That makes sense.
as much as you can.
You got to read it.
Yeah, and love it. Like, you've got to get excited about what they're writing as well.
So before we go any further, Marissa, just give us your website and your info. Just so how can people get in touch with you if they want to hire an editor?
My website is www.marissavu. And I also hang out a ton on Twitter, which is the same. It's Marissa Vu is my handle on there.
Awesome.
And Twitter is would you say that that's the social media preferred social media for publishers, editors? Because that's what I've heard.
I feel like it, yeah, and especially science fiction fantasy publishing.
Yeah.
Is that
Big
true?
time.
Yeah. It's either that or politics,
Yeah.
if you really want to get into some hateful discussion.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Nobody wants that. So, all right. Well, so we're going to start with some questions. We're just going to grill you. So get ready.
for it.
Okay. So first of all, I noticed on your website, you offer a bunch of different types of edits. I wonder if you could just go through a couple of the major ones. Like what different types of services can people get from you or other, freelance editors?
Yeah, it's basically, I guess there's 4 main types, which is there's developmental, there is content editing, which some people call substantive editing. There is line editing, and then there's the polishing stuff, which is like copy editing.
So what's developmental? So what does that entail?
So that's where you're starting with the early drafts and you're looking at the big picture stuff, like the character arcs, the world building, the big plot elements. Is it all working? Is it a story?
Are there plot holes?
Yeah.
Is your character a racist? Do you need to fix that? Yeah.
That comes out early.
Right.
And then what's content? Would you say context?
Content, that's more at the scene level. So you've got all the big pieces of the story in place now, and it's all kind of working, but you're really going into each scene and being is there a setup in the scene? Is there good dialogue? Does it make sense? Have you got extra, exposition in there?
And do you find that authors come to you and ask for one particular type, or do they just send it to you and say, I need your help, and then you come back and say, all right, let's start at developmental, or let's start at content, or let's start at line editing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So the more experienced authors pretty much know exactly what they want, and usually if they're experienced or a professional author, they want all of it. They're usually I want the 1, 2, 3, each
the whole
stage.
thing.
Yeah. But newer authors don't always know, and sometimes they'll come to me and ask, they want line editing. They want to get it polished up and out. And then I have to look at it and be like, no, it's really not ready for that yet. Like you're just like polishing something that isn't.
And that must be a tough conversation to have sometimes, because they may have in their head that it's ready to query, or it's, it just needs this.
Yeah, a little bit. I think sometimes they understand, or they just understand that I won't take it on and that they might be able to find like another editor who would do that. But usually I don't like working on a manuscript that hasn't had some kind of developmental editing, even if it's just by like friends who know storytelling really well, like something to really make sure.
Or a critique group or
I was
something.
about to say,
Or,
do you see a difference from manuscripts that have come from writers who work in a critique group versus writers who don't?
Totally, yeah. Really big difference. And I think that you've just taken it so much further, so you can sometimes skip out those earlier stages of professional editing. Sometimes, like
Some people take the criticism from the group, some people don't.
Exactly, yeah.
So that leads me to a question. So how, as an author, how would you know when is the right time to find an editor?
That's really hard. And like one thing you could do is try and get your outline sent to a professional editor and just see if you can find out whether it's all structurally in place, or if you have like a critique group, and see how comfortable you feel. Like if you've taken it as far as you can by yourself, then you kind of know you're ready for an editor. But you also don't want to take it too far sometimes, because if there's major problems with it, you don't want to put 100 hours into polishing something that needs to have like a good edit. So it's a little bit of intuition as well as like being critical of your work and really looking at it.
So you even get outlines?
Yeah, and that was something I started doing more recently, because I realized like it kind of sucks for an author to spend thousands of dollars on a developmental edit, especially if they don't know if they need it. So an outline is a really good way, like, you can spend like a few $100s and just find out if you have all the main pieces there, and if something is broken in that, like that's a really good place to start revising and rewriting.
Like, plot holes and shit.
Yeah.
Just an outline, yeah.
So you won't know if there's problems in like the scenes, but you can definitely tell if there's problems in the
like a break in the logical flow, or do you use specific structure types to analyze them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll try and talk to the author about what they actually wanted it to do and like where it should be going, and then look at their character arc. Is it all kind of there where they wanted it?
And do the outlines come, is it just written in prose? It's just, 5 pages or 10 pages, or do they actually like do bullet points or act one?
Yeah, what's the format for these outlines?
Both. I just take whatever they have usually and work with that. Some of them write like 15-page breakdowns with like quite descriptive notes on every single scene.
Right.
But some I've worked with that are just like a couple of pages.
It's funny because like what you're saying like rings true to me. Like when we're working in our group, we do beta reads. Like people can like sign up to have a full manuscript read, and a lot of times it's like, oh, there's so many structural things in development. Like the developmental editing stage is there, like where we don't bother doing line editing at all, or like it's like, well, you're probably going to cut this entire section out of the book. So
because you go off on a tangent so often.
Why is this happening now when something?
Yeah, with early works or early drafts or novice writers, they'll go off kind of left field, and then the whole book will go down this tangent for sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be in beta reads. I mean, we've all done that with our own work.
I have done it so
we've done
many
a draft
times.
and we're like, oh, this is all terrible. We have to re-outline this like 17 more times.
Don't worry about that sentence structure. The sentence
it's like-
you'll never see it again.
Well, that's the hardest thing. Like, is this ending fulfilling the setup? And that is just so difficult to get to, without writing it.
I mean, season 1, we were talking about all the plot points, like break into 2, inciting incident. And if you don't have those, then it's just
if you screw them up,
what are you doing?
You're in trouble.
That's a skill I would like to learn for sure, how to outline something coherently.
When you said outline, that was my ears perked up too, because I don't know how to outline very well.
I'm like, what's that website again?
So spoiler alert, or like Marissa has done a outline edit for me and also looked at my query letter for the runner, and she spotted a couple of things from the outline that were character arc issues just from the outline that were really helpful.
And what would your outline look like? Was it a 10 or 15 page?
No, mine was like 4 or 5 pages or something.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah. It was basically just the major plot points. It wasn't a chapter by chapter breakdown or anything.
And had you already read the full manuscript? It was the first time?
I still haven't read it.
No.
I haven't either, so you're not alone.
It's out with an agent right now.
Wait, can we just stay for that for a second?
absolutely.
So you had you written the outline independent of Marissa?
Yeah. So what I was doing was I had started querying, and I had found, I'd gotten a couple of partial requests or whatever, but I had a feeling that my query letter wasn't up to snuff, and particularly my outline, because a lot of agents ask for an outline as well. Not all of them. They all ask for different things, but I felt like my outline was severely lacking, and it wasn't doing the job.
Representing your
Yeah, it wasn't representing the story very well. So I wanted to have, and so Marissa and I do a writers group where it's a drinkers group that actually writes, and so I was like, maybe I'll just throw this over to Marissa, and it was really, really helpful. And I got a request for a full manuscript.
Awesome.
So all's good.
And so just by reading the treatment, you could tell that the character arcs were not there, and
Yeah.
And did you go back and fix these things within the
I
novel
did.
because things had been pointed out? Yeah.
Yeah, so you remember my last rewrite when I was rewriting the book
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
That was a lot of that was based on her notes on the outline. That was like, oh, I got to fix that.
So this is your framework.
Yeah.
You need to go in and add these. Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of stuff, that's what an editor is good for, is you're spending a little bit of money sometimes, but you're hopefully saving yourself a ton of time later. It's the whole,
Exactly.
it's like an exchange.
that's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Because it hurts when you realize you've done that. You're on chapter 18. You're
And you've polished it a million times. Yeah.
So much. So painful.
And you have to scrap.
Well, because that's where I'm at right now. I'm at 70,000 words, and I was telling AP on the ride over here where I'm at this point where I'm like, oh God, I'm in the break into Act 2, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure I like this, but I love this idea of you can do the treatment and from that identify what's wrong. That's a huge benefit.
And I'll be doing that myself as well. I'm working on a manuscript too, and it's very rough first draft right now, but I'll totally I'm going to, once I've got all the pieces there, the outline will go out to some different editors to try and get feedback on that before I do the second draft. It's going to save me hundreds of hours.
God, where were you a year ago?
I know. I'm already learning things from this podcast. This is terrific.
It's going so well.
I know.
So I have a question about picking the right editor for, if I'm a writer and I'm writing fantasy, how do I decide, okay, I've hit a brick wall with this, or I think it's as polished as I can get it. I need another pair of eyes on it. How do I go about finding the right editor for me?
That's an awesome question. The outline thing is a good way. First of all, you need to go to a site and find a list of editors and find the ones that sound right to you. It's kind of like dating, I guess. You're
Gotcha.
you're looking at their profiles.
You're researching. You're doing a lot.
Yeah,
of
you're
work.
seeing if the profile suits you, how they've written things. Check their the books they've edited on that they've edited before.
Is it stuff you like? Is it stuff you've read?
Yeah.
Is it similar?
Published
genre?
stuff.
And try and get a feel for how they explain things as well, because I think that's really important. Even if they love the same things as you, if they can't explain things in a way that connects with your brain.
Oh, that's a great point. Right. If you can't communicate with this person,
You're gonna
that's,
miss
that's
each other.
you're going to be missing each other. Yeah.
It sounds like a similar process to finding an agent.
Yeah.
Or an
Or a date.
I thought you
Or
just
a
set
date.
it out to any agent possible.
We'll take any agent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's not
but,
a bad strategy.
Historical nonfiction, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah. No, but you got to do your research and find people who, like you were saying, who know your genre for one, and then you have to have a couple of conversations if you're going to work together to see if
it's a relationship. So,
exactly. It's
you've
about
got-
compatibility.
It's a serious relation because it's you're gonna be telling these people things that are gonna cut them deep into their
their
tender little writers' hearts.
The editor sees things in your writing that you don't know you put there. So you have to trust that person. And
I noticed a lot of scenes with these naked nuns. What is
they
that
don't
about?
like boobs.
Do you want to talk about
What's
that?
your relationship with your mother?
So with that in mind, when someone reaches out to you, how much back and forth do you have with this author?
A bit. I try to chat to them about their vision and see if I get it. I try and read a bit of their work. I do a few pages of a sample edit to see if they like my style, and then we go from there. And I also really like working with people in small things first, so maybe just 10 or 20 pages, and then see how they go with the criticism.
So when you do that, do you do an hourly kind of thing, or how do you structure that?
All my pricing is by the word, so
Okay.
they just pay for however much they want to try.
Gotcha.
And then-
That makes sense.
That's cool.
So it's also about you figuring out if you can work with this
Totally.
particular writer. That's
Yeah.
really important as well.
Yeah, like I don't want to work with like egos and stuff. So it's a lot of like trying to make sure like on my side, if an author comes to me and they're like, I just want to make this book the best I can make it, and like I think I need someone, that's like my perfect client. Like, all right, we can work together. But if someone's like, hi, I have this amazing thing, just needs a little polish, then I'm like,
they're not gonna. They're not gonna.
Yeah. Then I run.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, I'm really busy for the next 3 years.
Forever.
Yeah. It's not about integrity then, it's about pandering to their ego, which is a totally different.
Which it's crazy to pay for that. Like you're paying for someone to like critique. You're not paying for them to stroke your ego.
But that's a big element. I mean, it's like you said, it's if people can't get past their own ego when they get to, I mean, you're giving your work to somebody to make it better. If you are coming in loaded, you're not going to get, you're not going to get as much out of it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we've talked a lot bit about the process. I don't know how much more there is to do, but I guess it just in nuts and bolts. So people find you primarily through your website, word of mouth, other authors.
Yeah, mostly word of
billboards.
mouth. But yeah, also I get some people come in cold from the website, or the Editorial Freelancers Association is a really good place to find editors. So I'm listed on there, and I get some jobs through there sometimes.
What was that again?
It's called the EFA.
The EFA. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good place to look for.
A good place to maybe start if you're looking for an editor.
If you have no like contacts for editors.
Oh, cool.
Right, because it does seem like you could just Google and then go down an internet hole.
Google,
so
Yeah.
you want to weed out.
There's a million editors on Twitter.
Yeah.
So then once you have a client and you have this relationship and you've decided you do want to work with them and they do want to work with you, what's the process like at that point? Like how long does it take for, say, like an 80,000 word book?
That can take, I usually have the book for a couple of months, 6 weeks to 8 weeks for one pass. So it depends on how many rounds we're doing. If we're doing a lot of back and forth and multiple passes, I can be working with a client for like 8 months.
Wow.
Like to take it all the way through.
But again, it depends on where the book is at when you get it.
Yeah.
What do they need? Yeah.
And how fast do they revise and how much feedback do they need? Yeah, it's very different for each client.
So if they are more engaged, you're saying even at like to AP's point. So if you got an 80,000 word manuscript, that could take months to edit and back and forth, and then at that point, then they still may need final polish, or you think that's usually by the time you're done with it, it's ready to go?
No, they would definitely still need a final polish. I think anytime you're working with an editor, especially at my level where I'm doing like developmental content and line editing, we're changing stuff.
Right.
So there's no way at the end of that, especially after they've made their revisions, that it won't need a polish. So that's when you get a copy editor or proofreader or 3 proofreaders. Like,
I was about to ask, so then there's the benefit to going then to another source to do...
For sure.
Doing kind of, like you said, a proof editing or kind of a nuts and bolts kind of view.
Yeah, because by that, you guys know what it's like. You can't, once you've been in something for a while, you can't even see the mistakes anymore. Like, you know what it's supposed to say. And your editor will get like that too. So before you publish, you definitely want like a totally fresh brain to
That's a good point. Yeah.
read
That's good
over it.
advice.
And are you mostly working with authors that are already published, or do you find yourself sometimes working with sort of novice writers that you see go through an entire journey to publication for the first time?
Both.
They may be sitting in this room.
That must be so satisfying.
It's the best. Yeah, that's my favorite thing, is like watching someone go from beginning through to like publishing and like seeing how much their writing improves. It's so fun.
Getting that first book
Yeah.
out there. That's really cool.
And even just seeing the revisions come back, because as an editor, you're not changing their words, you're kind of telling them where there are problems and you're making suggestions. What about this? Have you thought of that? And then that sparks their imagination to do whatever they want to do. And then you get that back and it's like, oh, that's amazing. Like, it's even better. Like,
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Must
Pulling
be
up
really
their strengths.
satisfying, yeah.
So can we talk about craft a little bit? I'm just curious. I suppose this is a massive question, but if you were to identify the most common or the most 3 common mistakes that you see writers make when they hand in a manuscript, what would you say that they are?
Yeah, it's a massive question. It's like
So many.
Yeah, just 3.
like
It's a
the
whole season of
the ways
podcasts.
you can break your story endless. Like, there's so many ways to to break that. But yeah, like some of the more common ones that I've been seeing recently, a really big one is like redundancy, not just in the sentence level, but in the story itself. So I think when you're writing the story and you're just enjoying yourself and you're trying to get the characters from like place to place for the next thing to happen, you write all that in. And then even if you've edited it, sometimes you can't quite see that there's still like a bunch of stuff there that's not necessary.
So characters moving down a street, going from one location to the next.
Yeah, getting
all of
around.
the filler.
A lot of like hygiene stuff.
Toothbrushing.
What does that mean?
You know, showers, waking up in the morning,
Looks
and
in the
like,
mirror.
There's a lot of like things like that just kind of
What about weather and food?
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
big too.
We've talked about that. And we've also talked a lot about stage direction.
Yes.
Like, I think that's what you're talking about. Like, he turned left, then right, then walked down the hallway, then stopped, then went through the doorway, that sort of thing? Or is that...
Totally. Like, if you need to get them from one place to another, there are really concise, elegant ways to do that without having to create like a whole scene around it or to describe every single movement.
Right.
Sometimes writers get very detailed and you'll like the hand goes onto the doorknob and then they turn the door and like
Right,
stuff like
and they
that.
think that they're building tension, right?
Yeah.
They think they're doing
Right.
drama, but what they're really doing is they're just slowing everything down.
Or like,
Yeah.
just like, it's kind of like, you know, he reached out and shook hands with him. You just say they shook hands. You know,
That is one
sort of
I
thing.
see a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I know because I write that 4 or
Filtering.
5 times a day.
Filtering.
Yeah.
That same sentence.
He
Yeah.
looked and saw and realized, no.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the actual scene, sometimes it's like then the actual stuff, the meat of the scene that should be there is like skimmed over really quickly. You know, that's what I find a lot.
All
of
the
time
space
when-
is taken up by...
all the space has been taken up by getting there.
Yeah.
To the,
And so when you
to the
cut
scene.
all that stuff out, you usually just end up with the best, like really cool, nice lines that do the same job, and all that extra stuff wasn't it's just creative
necessary.
process.
So, Marissa, when we were planning the podcast, you came up with some good example of a couple of different things, and you had one that shows a writer doing non-redundancy, or however you call it.
The opposite.
Just dundancy.
It was just
Lots
some
of
redundancy.
Redundancy, yeah.
What, it was Philip K. Dick, was it?
Yeah, it's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
AP, you want to read it?
Oh, yeah, sure. On his way to work, Rick Deckard, as Lord knew how many other people, stopped briefly to skulk about in front of one of San Francisco's larger pet shops along Animal Row. In the center of the block-long display window, an ostrich, in a heated clear plastic cage, returned his stare. The bird, according to the info plaque attached to the cage, had just arrived from a zoo in Cleveland. It was the only ostrich on the West Coast. After staring at it, Rick spent a few more minutes staring grimly at the price tag. He then continued on to the Hall of Justice on Lombard Street and found himself a quarter of an hour late to work.
So what we're saying is the tendency of a novice writer would be to say the cage was in the window to the left of to describe all of the kind
Yeah,
of...
so, I mean, you chose this, so what do you like about it other than the obvious?
So that's the start of a new scene, and a lot of new writers would have made the whole getting to work thing probably would have been its own scene, like in an early draft, describing all of the way he got there and probably giving you information about the world. And then when he gets to the pet store, they probably would have described that in this world, you know, live animals are rare and given you all this, you know, extra information. Whereas in Philip K. Dick's example, like that paragraph kind of does all that work in just like a few sentences. He's on his way to work. He's stopping at Animal Row, which kind of tells you already,
Right.
you know, like
Why is there a row of animals?
there's a row of
Drops,
animals
yeah.
in San Francisco now. And he gets hooked on the price tag, you know, so you know
the
he like
price
really
breaks-
wants this animal.
The price tag line was the one that stuck out for me most because it's like, he doesn't say, he stared at the price tag, couldn't believe how much it was. And,
Right.
you know, he just shows us looking at it
Grimly.
and then walking away without purchasing it. It tells us
Right.
everything we need to know.
And it made him late for work. Like he stood there long
Yeah.
enough.
And we don't need to see how he gets to work. Exactly.
Yeah.
He shows that he's late.
And none of that's explained. It's just kind of
Right.
like, it's like underneath there.
Just the thing that I get in my writing and the criticism I get of my writing is that tell us more. So, you know, how, I mean, I guess I know I'm asking the $1 million question is how do you get that line between giving just enough so that it's intriguing and interesting and dramatic and not going over the line and just, you know, hitting that point over the head.
Yeah, well, I think it's not so much tell us more as they're usually doing that show rather than tell, and usually it's more like pick the right details. So if you can give like 3 really vivid key details that do a lot of work, that is way better than telling anything like at length.
Right, explaining or doing interior monologue of what the character is thinking at that moment as a way of doing exposition or something.
Yeah, and you can say so much about a room or a space or anything with just like a couple of really cool details.
I think there's an element there too of, with experience, you learn to trust the reader a little bit more. So like you can put something out there without all the information, and an attentive reader is going to make the leaps without having you needing to tell them obviously what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like for another example, like just to make up one would be, say you wanted to show a setting in like a diner and you want to say now it's morning and now it's the next day or whatever, like all you'd need to do is like put like a morning beam of sunlight like hitting the salt and pepper shakers in a diner table, and then like now you've done it. Now you know you're in a diner. Now you know it's the morning. It has to be the next day.
But that's a great point. It's focused. It's not, it was the next morning versus, right.
And it's so much more visual than
Exactly. It's evocative.
So much more interesting.
telling it. Yeah. Saying it out loud. Yeah.
So the other one that I see a lot of is the opposite of that, where the writer just isn't putting enough on the page to give you any kind of context for what's happening. It could be like setting or other characters or just what's going on in the scene. Like they just go straight to it and they forget to give you those cues that you need to put yourself in the scene.
Gotcha.
So you get that kind of talking heads feeling sometimes when characters are just throwing dialogue back and forth at each other with no setting
just heads
detail.
floating in space with no.
A lot of heads floating in space.
I see that a lot.
What's like,
You see that.
Yeah, another one is sometimes you're in the scene and you'll be halfway through the scene and then they'll say something about like something at the gym or something at a train station. You're like, wait, what? They're at a train station?
Yeah.
Like, you totally forgot to set that up. And that's really common. Like when you're writing and you're like seeing it all in your head, you kind of forget that you have to like put all that stuff on the page for the reader.
It's so important. It adds so much to the book too.
Yeah.
It's important with every type of novel, but with science fiction and fantasy, when you're also trying to create a world that might be different to our own, you can't just assume that the reader knows what it is that you're talking about.
It's true.
But if you go back to that first example where you wanted to be so streamlined and so just hitting those points, like that's, I can I know firsthand making that mistake where, let me just get right to it. Let me just get right to that interesting thing or that one showing detail.
I think you just pick the most, for example, I read this book recently, The Book Thief, and it's narrated by Death. Death tells the entire story, and Death has this obsession with describing the sky all the time, and he describes it as curry soup sometimes, or pea soup, and the language that he uses kind of helps create him as a character, as a sort of obscure, imaginative, strange character, but also highlights how hungry everyone is because he uses food terms. And it also creates this sort of setting of absurdity. All these people are killing each other during the war. It's so strange.
Wow.
And just those, that to me was so clever. It said everything just very quickly.
That's really interesting. Do we have another like a written example we can read?
So I've got an example that I sent you guys in the email. It's by Cassandra Khaw. I think that's how you say her surname. I could be totally wrong. From A Song for Quiet.
Okay, I'm going to read it. The train rattles like teeth in a dead man's skull as Deacon James sags against the window, hat pulled low over his eyes. Only a few share the wide orange-lit carriage with him. A young Chinese family, the children knotted like kittens over the laps of the adults. An undertaker in his Sunday grim, starched collar and golden cufflinks on each sleeve. 2 black women trading gossip in rich contraltos.
I have so much work to do on my book.
Give it up.
God damn it.
I mean, that is setting a scene. Damn.
Yeah, like it just like
It's so
evokes everything
quickly.
in your head, right? Like it's just like the choice of details.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying with the Philip K. Dick about picking like 3 details or whatever that do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's like, Jesus, how do you get that? I mean,
But he's also building a theme. He's talking about like the rattling teeth in the skull and the Sunday grim. Like it's dark, foreboding.
And am I right in saying that it's a musician that's narrating whose point of view?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they might notice those particular details on the train.
that's a whole
but
nother
again,
level.
Isn't that clever?
That's very clever.
But to your point, Marissa, like we know we're on a train. First, second word, train.
Yeah.
So we're trained. So we immediately then jump to, I don't know the setting of the book, but it's a train compartment. So it's not like a modern train where we're all facing forward, right? So it's sort of like two sets of seats facing each other, right?
Yeah. And then even those details like the children, what does it say, like draped like kittens?
Yeah, like
Or,
kittens in the lap.
That's just great.
like all those like visual things. There's audio in there too.
Yeah.
You're getting all the
Other
different senses
yeah.
and like, and it's just every detail is really interesting and like
Unique.
unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And specific.
Specific and unique.
Very
So
specific.
the lesson is just to be good.
Just being this awesome
No.
writer.
Just be a
Think
better
it through.
writer.
Yeah,
No,
just-
the lesson is edit.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Because
Well said.
you guys, you're saying like, oh, I've got so much work to do, and like, how do you do this? Like, it looks so effortless, right? But
Yeah.
you put all that redundant shit in, and then mom,
Yeah.
you put all the redundant shit in, and then you when you pull all that out, that's what's left, and you just
Right,
keep the really
yeah.
good stuff. So you probably have it there. You just might not have like
I
pruned all
appreciate
the
you.
baggage.
Yeah, no, that's
Assuming that's
quite the assumption. Yeah.
That's a really
Baggy writing.
But I get your point, right? We have no
You're
idea
right,
how much
yeah.
she wrote to get to that. She could have
Right.
written, if that's 200 words, she could have written 2,000 words and then distilled it to that.
Yeah,
got rid of-
and like me and Chris's favorite author, like Jeff Vandermeer, he writes really beautiful atmospheric description like that. And I just saw something with him yesterday where he goes through like 26 edits to get to that. Wow. So it's just like pruning and polishing and refining and
Again and again and again.
yeah.
Just working really hard
Yeah, no,
until
I'm
it's
really depressed.
just really good.
I know. It's so much work.
But
Why are we doing this again?
Yeah, totally. But it is actually also at the same time, it's inspiring to me that like if you put in the work, you may not come up with that passage, but you can make your work better by putting in the effort and learning about
Right.
craft and struggling with it for decades.
Oh, totally. No, and it totally brings back the point, which is, that we're always hearing or reading, which is just keep writing. Like you have to get the words on the page at the very beginning, and then you do the second pass and the third pass. and the
Yeah,
fourth pass.
and don't forget as well, like when you look at like filmmaking, and you see all the different jobs that all those people are doing, like you're doing that whole thing yourself.
True.
So that's why you
You're
have
the
these
best
critique
boy,
groups and
the
editors. Like, yeah,
Yeah, you're catering.
you're the actor, you're the director,
Totally.
you're like the cinematographer, like everything. It's so much work. It's insane that anyone ever.
All right, let's just not do it anymore, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's do a
sorry?
film podcast from now on.
Come make this.
Let's go to film school. All right, well, we have time for one more,
We have time for
maybe
one more.
Yeah.
common mistake. What
Yeah, so the other one that I thought of, that I see a lot of, that's more developmental, is I quite often have to tell my authors to be meaner to their main characters. Like, they're just, in early drafts especially, you love your character so much and you don't want to hurt them, but you have to hurt them and you have to make it hard, and they have to struggle and feel hopeless, just like I just did to you guys.
Thank
like,
you.
You know,
You're doing a
like,
great job.
You
Yeah.
are so good.
yeah, you got to make them work for that victory at the end. And quite often I get early drafts where the author knows where the character has to get to, which is success usually at the end.
Right.
So as each challenge comes up, they solve it and they progress and they learn new skills and they go
overcome
through
obstacles,
and it's
right.
really great. And that
So
is
there's
not
no
so
trial,
fun.
try, fail. It's all try, succeed.
They sometimes have try fails, but their try fails get over it really fast. It's almost like by rote, like I have to have this try fail thing, but it doesn't seem to really impact the character a lot. They don't feel that kind of despair or how am I going to get through this, or
So it's really the mechanics you feel working of just trying to get to the success
Yeah,
at
and
the
like
end for the character.
maybe they don't have their support system there for them when this horrible thing is happening, or like it's basically that thing of like what could go wrong here, what could make this even worse for them and put them in an even worse situation. So the reader is like, how the hell are they going to get out of this? I have no idea.
That's the key. That's the
That's
drama.
the fun part.
Yeah.
That's the fun part. Yeah.
Why don't you wrap up our wrap up?
Well, just to say that if you are working on a manuscript and you've hit a brick wall, or maybe you just have an outline and you want to get it logic checked before you go and spend the next 3 years of your life writing out the story,
That's huge.
then an editor is definitely something to consider.
Well, thanks for
Thank you so
joining
much.
us.
Thank you,
It
Marissa.
was
This has
super
been very-
Thank
informative.
you very much.
Thanks for
This was
having me.
awesome.
It's fun.
What's your website again?
www.marissavu.com.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So if you're looking for a freelance editor specializing in sci-fi and fantasy, you know where to go, people.
All right. This has been the Genre Hustle. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.